All right, everybody. Today we've got Pete Zayas,
Zayas.
Pete Zayas, better known as at Laker Film Room. Over the last few months, Pete has really burst onto the scene with his in-depth breakdown videos of the Lakers, from what philosophies and sets we can anticipate from Luke Walton to what the Lakers did incorrectly last season that need to be shored up to mesh with Luke's style, to individual player breakdowns of the Lakers players and young core and how their respective skills will fit into particular sets and offenses. Just today, Pete actually released a breakdown video of Larry Nance Jr.'s performance in the Summer League, which was really great to dig into. So yeah, Pete has just done a really good job of overall taking something, I guess, a little bit daunting for fans in terms of offensive sets in the NBA and making it easier for us to understand. And he's really found a way to break down some of the more nuanced principles of the game and make it very intuitive, applicable, and easy to follow through his video. So I wanted to thank Pete for that. But I'll let Pete kind of introduce himself really quick. And Pete, can you give us just like an elevator pitch of yourself and your, I guess, your basketball experience? Because after watching your videos, I have to wonder whether or not, you have any sort of like coaching experience, whether you've actually played basketball and how you've kind of delved into the nuances of like different NBA offenses. So, Pete.
Thank you very much for having me, Jonathan and Tommy. I appreciate it. I was as far as my playing experience, I was an end of the bench JV guy, so not a whole lot to speak of there. I did coach high school ball and AAU for a few years, and I had to step away with that to help run my business with my wife. But the itch has never really gone away for that. So last couple of years, I've been helping out some friends of mine who are still coaching and in the small bits and pieces that I can. And so the Laker Film Room deal helps me scratch that itch while still being able to have a life, because coaches have to put a lot of time into doing their jobs.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that before we get started on the specific questions, but what made you kind of want to do this Laker Film Room series? And I know you just started this past summer when the Lakers got Luke Walton as a coach. So can you kind of give us a kind of in-depth look into what made you want to do that? So
Yeah, it's a couple of things. For one, I'm really fired up about the season, about the direction the Lakers are going in. I think this season is kind of a ground floor, and they've got so many great ingredients to work with between the talent that's been acquired over the last couple of years, and then understanding what they were doing in Golden State and kind of the switch that was flipped between the Mark Jackson regime and then going into Steve Kerr, and just really enjoying that style of play and hoping to see that applied to this young Laker core. And then secondly, I want to give Laker fans at least an alternative to all of the hot takes that are out there. And there's so many
sure.
basketball opinions that are out there. And I want to at least, I want to try to turn the focus back over to basketball, and
Right.
the nitty gritty of the sport that we all love. And, it's great to have opinions, and there's a place for that. But I really like being able to demonstrate my point through almost the way like a lawyer would in a courtroom. You know what I mean? And in the Laker Film Room videos, I try to present both the good and bad, and not really try to take a side, just try to present what actually happened.
For sure. And Tommy actually works at a law firm. So Tommy's actually watched most of your videos more in depth than I have. So I kind of want to ask Tommy, from you're the ones who kind of introduced our group actually to Laker Film Room
That's
videos
right.
and Pete's videos. So can you give us just like an overall viewpoint of why you were drawn to, Pete's videos in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you watch the videos, it's really clear how amazing they are. It's just like you don't find that quality of in-depth, let's break down play-by-play analysis. On YouTube, it's so easy to find highlight videos. It's so easy to find even like there's that basketball coach or whatever who does some videos. Do you know who I'm talking about? That
Yeah,
he
yeah.
that guy does some videos once in a while. But to break it down by player and to break it down by this is what happened on this play, like let's slow it down. Let me show you exactly what's happening. This is what he could have done. This is what he should have done, or like this is what he was supposed to do and he did it perfectly. You don't find that anywhere else. So I was really drawn to that aspect of the videos, and I think you guys watched them and it was like, wow, it's like really obvious why they're so great.
Yeah, totally. There's no debate with your videos, Pete, and I think that's something we really appreciate. And, even for fans that maybe are getting into basketball for the first time, I think the way that you break your videos down and edit them, it helps those new fans kind of get into what basketball is all about, what the normal principles are, and it's just like a really great resource for new NBA fans, old NBA fans, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to thank you again for that. Before we get into the real questions, do you want to real quickly plug your social media accounts and whatnot?
Yeah, just follow me on Twitter. I'm doing kind of some pirate radio stuff, with this account, and that I have to use a lot of NBA footage, and sometimes the NBA takes kindly to it, and sometimes it doesn't. So if you follow me at Laker Film Room on Twitter, I'll be able to direct you to whatever videos I have up at any given time. So.
Great. So let's get right into the Lakers stuff. Obviously, it's a new era in all sense of the word, but not to delve too much into the past, but with regards to the Princeton system that the Lakers were running for the last 2 years, and I put Princeton in major quotes, how do you think that system helped or impeded our young players? And first of all, I'm not sure how well versed you are in the Princeton, but would you say they even ran it correctly?
They actually didn't run the Princeton much at all. And I don't just mean that they attempted to run it, but they just failed at it. They ran a couple of sets. The predominant Princeton set that they ran was called Chin, which Byron Scott, being the master disguise that he was, the point guard would touch his chin on the play, and that's how you'd know that's the set they were about to run.
Nice.
But they ran, and then you can guess what the call for elbow was. So they ran some triangle sets. They ran a little bit of Princeton. They ran horns and floppy and elbow series. And then in late February, in the middle of the Memphis home and home series, they switched to motion weak, which is Golden State runs that a bit. San Antonio runs that probably best of any team in the NBA. And that's the Lakers went on a little 3-on-3 run over 6 games, and that's when Russell started breaking out. I think he averaged 20 plus in that first little stretch. In terms of the thing about Princeton is that it's a system, and what that means is that it's based on read and react principles and continuity. In that, in a continuity offense, if the shot clock was 240 seconds long instead of 24 seconds long, you theoretically would still be able to be running your offense in the 230th second, and where one action flows into the next. The Lakers, in the Princeton that they ran and in the triangle that they ran, and really any set, they had one initial action, and if that action didn't work, the play broke down and it was either an isolation or a pick and roll. So they ran Chin and they ran Princeton in that they stood in the spots where you would draw it up on a clipboard to say, this is what Princeton looks like. But anything after that didn't bear any resemblance to Princeton. and even I'd say as they went on, they ran Chin and just their general Princeton sets, I'd say less than 10% of the time last season. In terms of how it impacted their players, I think it was a bit of a lost year. As much as I hate to say that, the best sugarcoat that I could put on it is that it taught a guy like D'Angelo Russell how to score in a one-on-one setting. He got a lot of experience with the shot clock running down, and Clarkson did as well. But for the most part, they weren't taught how to play, which is very fundamental in system basketball, like the triangle, Princeton, or the flow offense like they run in Golden State, San Antonio. It was, to say that they ran Princeton would be like saying that, a team runs what Golden State runs because they shoot a lot of threes. It's so superficial that it doesn't even scratch the surface of what they did.
Yeah, to that end, at times it looked like the guys out there, like you said, were just robotically running these sets without any real purpose or intentionality, or almost like, well, this is where coach said I was supposed to be and I'm here. But too often I feel like the defenses saw these sets coming from a mile away, and then it didn't seem like there was very much creativity or flexibility towards the end there, during the times where you're supposed to be kind of creative and improvise. So do you think that's more a product of having a very young team that just couldn't grasp those principles, or
no,
a product of the principle being a very complex system to grasp?
No, it wasn't and again, they weren't running Princeton, so it wasn't a matter of like, it wasn't like they were running Princeton and failing at trying to run Princeton. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It was the reason that the defense saw it coming from a mile away is that we had no counters. And what I mean by that is that, say we're running a floppy set, right, which is when the big will set a down screen and then the wing will come around and you'll have the guard up top making this decision on which guy to pass it to. We ran those mostly for Nick Young when he played earlier in the year.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like a receiver in football. If you have a play and you only have one receiver, the defense is going to catch on to that if you don't have a secondary and a third option.
Right.
When teams, if you remember Utah before Kobe's last game, Utah beat the hell out of the Lakers last year every time they played them before that last kind of unusual game. And any team that ball pressured or played ball denial off of the ball ended up pushing the Lakers catches out 30 feet. And there was no back cut. Anytime a team is gonna pressure you like that, you want to put pressure in the opposite direction. You want to back cut to the rim. You want to back screen them so that they won't be so bold in coming out and pressuring you. So the reason that teams could see it coming from a mile away is that there was no counter to what the initial action that they wanted to run. You know what I mean?
Right. So. Great. You're making me feel dumber and dumber by the second, but at the same time, I'm feeling smarter and smarter by hearing you talk. So, Tommy, do you have any comments on the last two questions or anything else you wanted to throw out there?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, you made a comment earlier about, Jonathan, you did, about how Pete's videos are a really good tool for new fans to learn the game. And I was about to say, man, I'm a diehard fan. I've been watching basketball for over 20 years, and I feel like I learned so much just by watching these videos and talking to you now. So.
Oh, I appreciate that. You know, my first coaching gig was actually at a Division IV high school, and
wow.
you go into a coaching gig like that thinking, oh yeah, I got all these great plays in my playbook, and I'm gonna do this and that, and then you realize, oh, I got to teach them how to V-cut. You know, I got to teach them how to pivot, and that was really a great experience for me to be able to grasp not only the fundamentals but the utilization of it. You know, how
right.
It's applied in the games. And I always go back to that, no matter, whether I'm watching the NBA or whether I'm watching a high school game. I always go back to that initial experience coaching very low level basketball and seeing how those concepts are applied from anywhere from high school all the way up to the NBA. So I'm glad you guys get something out of it. I appreciate that.
No, for sure. Okay, last question, I swear, on the pass.
No, it's great.
On the topic of Byron Scott, where did he go wrong then? Do you blame pretty much them not fully grasping the Princeton or even fully utilizing it to its fullest extent on Byron Scott? And if so, where did you think he went wrong?
Or just even to reframe that based on how the previous questions have gone, like, is it like, forget the Princeton, just the offense generally was pretty poor the last 2 years. So whatever they were trying to run out there, would we put the blame on Byron, or is the blame, on the young team, on the lack of continuity, et cetera?
Look, who am I to criticize an NBA coach? I know how much goes into those guys. I've worked with a couple of guys that have worked on the NBA level. It was the most poorly coached team I've ever seen on a professional level. Now, mind you, young players generally suck, right? They're going to miss reads. They're going to miss assignments defensively. That's usually where they're worst, is on defensive rotations. Everything's happening a little quicker than they're used to. Last year was not a matter of good ideas being run poorly. Mm-hmm. It was bad ideas run poorly with both inexperienced players and guys who were way over the hill. And that's why, you remember the Don McClain comments about,
yes,
the comments he made about, hey, everyone's laughing at you. And it was, seeing what I see when I watch a game, it was like pulling teeth. It was so hard to watch because it was so poorly conceived on every level. And then you add the off the court stuff with his demeaning of all of the guys and, the fake tough guy act. He was always portrayed as a disciplinarian, but he was actually, in my opinion, an authoritarian. And to me, the difference is that disciplinarians are able to instill discipline, right? And
Right.
all of his teams for quite some time now are really lack discipline on several levels, and so it's frustrating because I would have liked to see more of what the young guys were bad at, what they really did need to work on, and
Mm-hmm.
part of that was masked by just such poorly conceived game plans and then low morale to go on top of it. So I would put the lion's share of the blame on Byron, and that's not to say that the Lakers would have been good last year without him, but it was as poorly coached team as I've seen.
Oh, there's a tangible difference between, being bad and then seeing the on-court product and
Right.
realizing, wow, you don't see any promise whatsoever. Right. And you're on the right podcast because we've only been on for a year and maybe 75% of our podcast is Byron Scott bashing. So, so with that said, we'll leave the past behind, get on with the future. So let's get on. Thank God. Exactly. So let's get on with Luke Walton and what he's going to implement. So I guess just overall vague generalness. What ways do you think that Luke will make our players' lives better, easier, and what general ways will players need to improve their own personal games to kind of help progress that and help that come about?
Well, I first and foremost, I think there's a lot to be said for wanting to wake up and go to work in the morning, and I just in an existential sense. I think that's going to be a night and day difference. And I think we've already seen that. I think we've seen all of the reports of the young guys and how hard they've been working, how excited they are. We saw tangible applications of that in the summer league. From a more concrete standpoint, I think it's actually going to start on the defensive end. We tend to get caught up in talking about systems on the offensive end, and that's definitely a lot sexier. But I think that our offensive schemes were poor in the past couple of years, so were our defensive schemes. I think that you're going to see a difference in our help side defense concepts. I think defensively you're going to see probably more switching, and that's going to be something that the guys like that's somewhere where Randall can really come in and be a real asset on the defensive end. Is you don't need a guy a big to switch and lock down Kyrie Irving or whatever, but you need him to be competent in an isolation setting. So I think you're going to see more of that. We would put ball pressure up way too high, and that would we overextended our defense and all over the place, and so there were a lot of lanes that I think will be covered up. I think the guys will know their defensive rotations, and really that's probably the most important thing, is that when a guy knows what he's supposed to be doing, even if he messes up, you can go to the tape and go, hey, this is supposed to be the rotation. On top of that, when he gets those repetitions of doing the same thing over and over and over again, he doesn't have to think about it anymore. He's just going to make that rotation. Right. And I think that continuity and clarity of letting the guys know what they're supposed to be doing defensively, I think that's going to be a huge difference. Then transitioning from the defensive end to the offensive end, the one thing that we saw in summer league was more different transition principles being applied. We saw Nance grabbing and pushing the ball up court probably more in the first couple of games than we saw all of last year. We saw guys having dedicated lanes to run in transition. That was one thing that happened a lot last year, is the Lakers would kind of meander up court, and Russell would get the ball just over the 8-second line, right at 16 seconds left on the shot clock. Yep. Guys would then kind of meander to their position on the set play that they have called, and then now there's 12 seconds left on the shot clock, and then they run that one action, and now that's broken down because the defense knows exactly what's coming. Now there's 7 seconds left, and hey, let's try and run a high pick and roll and see if we can make lemons out of lemonade, or lemonade out of lemons. We're going to see, a difference in transition principles. And I think that early offense stuff is going to be the first thing that we see implemented. In the summer league, we saw a lot of drag screens, which is when the trailing big is going to come down and basically set a pick and roll for the guard who's pushed the ball up court. Let's see. I'm sorry. This is a loaded question.
No problem.
then
I guess let's start there in terms of like, what are some of the small, simple ways outside of just getting the offense started a little quicker that you think Luke will be able to implement from his time in Golden State? I think you said it best. Like I remember watching a video that you made chronicling the typical sets that Golden State ran, and part of that was the transition play, but also a large part of it too was just setting very basic standstill screens that just actually touch the defender. So could you kind of, I guess, expound upon that a little more? Just screen setting in general and other simple stuff?
Well, screen setting is that is the core. That is what everything else pivots around, right? Mm-hmm. Is the ability to set and use screens well. So that's going to be something that I anticipate will be taught every day in practice. It was something the Lakers were terrible at last year, and that's going to be one of the core principles. And then making the reads off of the screens on every screen. Both players have the ability to slip the screen. They have the ability to cut to the basket. They have the ability to pop out. And so the ball handler has that combination to be looking at and knowing, if you've got Mozgov setting a down screen for Clarkson, and Randall has the ball up top. Randall knows that Clarkson can either curl to the basket or he can pop out for the three. He also knows Mozgov is probably not going to pick and pop on that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And them having an understanding of making those reads and not just setting screens, but using them and then reading the screens. That's going to be a foundational principle. Absolutely.
Awesome. And, like in Summer League, to go back on Summer League, did you start to see a little bit of progression outside of just transition play on them trying to implement new sets? Obviously, it's difficult because these guys you have rookies like Brandon Ingram and Zubac and everything. Sure. And even like D'Angelo and Nance learning this new stuff all at once. But I saw some stuff where they were, doing pin down screens and several people were fanning out from different directions, which, I don't know what the terms are, but I just know that I've never seen this kind of motion from Byron Scott's system. And I'm like, wow, that looked beautiful. It looked clunky as heck, but there are different guys doing different things. Amazing. So I guess if you could talk upon that a little and what you saw in Summer League.
Sure. Well, the set stuff that the Lakers did, one was motion weak, which is a continuance of what they did at the very tail end of last year. And then they ran some floppy sets as well. The difference is, the thing is that what we ran last year wasn't different from what a lot of the league runs. The whole league runs horns. Much of the league these days runs motion weak. Much of the league runs floppy. But it's the difference between, algebra and calculus, and the floppy sets that I saw us even in Summer League getting into were, it was 2-3 progressions into the floppy series. All of these sets are series where, okay, this didn't work, now it flows into this. That didn't work, it flows into this. The Lakers last year would only get into that first part of it. So we're seeing similar sets to what we ran last year, and we'll see some stuff that they didn't, but it's just much further along in the series, and it's being taught. Guys were setting good screens. Guys were curling tight off of the screens. It's not just a matter of saying, okay, stand here and do this. It's a matter of actually teaching the footwork and the teaching points within that, hey, this isn't going to work if you don't curl tight off of the screen. It's not going to work if you don't sprint to screen and do a jump stop at the end and get wide and lock the defender's foot in. You know what I mean? So it's just more sophistication within similar concepts. There wasn't a whole lot that we did differently. It was just much better.
So it's almost like giving an 8-year-old a coloring book and then asking a professional animator all of a sudden to take that same coloring book and draw, like, color within the lines all of a sudden, right. and then it looks.
That's a great analogy, and even if they're using the same crayons, it's not going to turn out the same way,
Exactly. All right, so I guess out of the Lakers' young core, who do you think will take to Luke's principles really early on and fit perfectly into what Luke is trying to do? And do you foresee any particular players, maybe because of their skill set right now and their basketball IQ right now, who may have some challenges?
Sure. I think Russell is the guy that's going to take to this like a fish to water. So much about his game is tailor-made to motion, to ball movement and player movement, which are really the foundational principles of what I expect us to do. I think Clarkson is underrated and a bit underappreciated. When the Lakers switched to motion weak last year, I saw him as a very good screener, and he uses screens well on top of that. A lot of the actions, such as cutting, such as spot up shooting, and working off of screens. If you look at the play type data on NBA.com, Clarkson was in the 60th percentile and up in most of those actions that involve movement. I think that he can be somewhat pigeonholed into the idea that he's a ball stopper and that he, is a one-on-one or a pick and roll type of player. I think he's capable of being a lot more, but he was in Byron Scott's offense too.
Right.
The thing with him is he going to be able to make the reads off of the guys that are setting screens off of the ball and hit the big that slips the screen or hit the wing right on time as he curls off of that screen? I think that remains to be seen. And then obviously on the defensive end, he's a
he's a sieve, man. Yeah.
He's a bit of a hot mess on the defensive end, and that's gonna be troublesome going forward if he doesn't remedy that.
But like he said, he actually admitted in an interview, like, I never learned how to play defense before, which is incredible, but he admitted it. So hopefully once he actually learns, then we can start to see some progress. But sure. I guess for Clarkson, how important do you think him shoring up his three-point shot? Look, he made progressive strides last year, but it kind of came more in waves in terms of him getting hot in stretches.
Sure.
But this summer, it looks like we saw that one practice video of him hitting like 15 threes from like 40 feet, So how important is it for Clarkson to become a lethal catch and shoot player curling off screens and whatnot for this system?
It's certainly important. And that ability to hit them coming off of screens is vital in this system. That was something, it's partially due to talent, but Clay led the league. I think he had 500 off-screen attempts last year, and I think Steph was fifth, and I think those two combined to shoot more of those than all but 3 or 4 teams last year. I'm not sure about that last part, but it was more than those two guys, more than most of the league. So the ability to shoot off of screens, being that that's the foundational principle of this offense, that's going to be absolutely critical. It was something he was pretty good at, and I want to see Russell to be able to do that as well at a high level. But that's absolutely important, and I want to see him. I saw that video too. I want to see him knocking those down off of curls and off of down screens.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think the thing with Clarkson too is that we already know that he can attack off the dribble, so just like shoring up that part of his game will make him even more lethal.
Right.
Tommy, anything you want to add?
Lethaler is not a word, but
okay. Well, let's just make me feel even dumber. But okay.
No, sorry. I know I'm a little long-winded, guys, but on Ingram, he's a really good screener, which I'm really happy to see. Both in college, he was used in horn sets a lot, and then toward the end of summer league, he was used as a screener in like a pick and pop type of situation. His ability to shoot and handle the ball is really vital in that. He's not particularly good right now at using screens and coming off of those, so that's going to be something that he's going to need to add to his game. Guy like, and then on the defensive end, I'm really bullish on Ingram as a defensive prospect. I think he's going to, maybe not at the age of 18 or 19 as he'll start the season, but in the very near future, he's going to be a very high caliber defender. With Nance, he sets good screens and he's a versatile defender. It's just a matter of, is he going to be able to be consistent with his outside shot? And is he going to be able to make those reads as a ball handler at the top of the key? That was something that he struggled with in summer league. And then, for me, Julius Randle is the X factor in this season. He's a guy that I watch, and he's frustrating for me because I feel like has been very poorly coached throughout his lifetime. He having coached a little bit of AAU ball, he seems to me like a guy that was used by coaches growing up for his talent and to help them win games, and that they didn't give much back to him. And there's an enormous discrepancy between his natural ability and his effectiveness on the court right now and understanding of how to play 5-on-5 basketball. So he's a really fascinating case study to me in how quickly can this style of play be taught to a player. I think his learning curve of all of the young guys is the steepest. But his ability to handle the ball as a guy his size and his ability to switch on pick and rolls, he could be just a really incredible asset. But he's so far behind right now in terms of understanding how to play 5-on-5. And I really don't think much of that is his fault. So he's the guy I'm really keeping an eye on. And if he can catch on, I think that boosts the Lakers' win total this year by a few games.
Oh, for sure. So I guess to stay on that point a little bit, for me, especially even more so after watching your Nance video, I was just like, man, this guy fits perfectly into everything that Luke is trying to do in terms of a guy that just knows how to set a hard screen. And then not only that, but more importantly, roll hard to the rim and then be able to finish, Yeah. So I feel like the problem too much last year, and I guess in his entire career, Julius Randle off the pick and roll, whenever he got the ball back, would stop the motion entirely and stop the flow and not roll hard and just start jab stepping and then isoing for 5 seconds and then going in to take his own shot. And I'd be like, what was the purpose of this pick and roll or this pick and pop if you're going to take 3 seconds to collect yourself and do nothing with it? And then you saw that in his 42% field goal shooting or whatever. Right. And the other thing is, I don't think he can finish particularly well, even if he did roll. So do you see what's the issue there? So
that's a really good question. Those are all spot on observations. For one, he doesn't make contact on his screens. And he's a guy that smacks of someone who's always had the ball in his hands, and that's the style of play that he's used to. And so, and this is true of a lot of young players. A lot of young players don't understand the value of rolling, even if you're not going to get the ball, because if you make contact on the screen, that's going to bring the secondary defender onto the ball. By rolling to the basket, you're going to bring over the weak side defender to tag you. You're getting a teammate open by doing that. In doing that, if that guy's knocking down shots, that weak side guy is going to be less inclined to tag you as a roll guy, and that's when you're going to get some pick and roll baskets yourself. I don't think he's ever played in the style of play that he's being asked to play in the NBA. He's been a guy that, he's massive and has great ball handling and can pretty much get to whatever part of the court that he wanted to and every other level that he's ever played. So all of this is very much new to him. The ability to finish around the hoop, that's something that concerns me as well. But I also think that he's not as open as he would be if he set a good screen and rolled hard in the first place.
Sure. Right. Tommy, anything to add on Randle, Nance, etc.?
I was just wondering if your impressions of Randle, or if you thought maybe another one of Randle's issues might be that he's made comments about this over the years, right? He's always like, oh, when I was growing up, I didn't want to be Shaq, I wanted to be Kobe. And, he sort of plays like with this, and you sort of touched on it, but he plays with this mindset of all of his basketball glory is going to come from scoring and having the ball in his hands and doing everything, being a one-man team, basically. Do you think at this stage in his career, I mean, he's so young still, he's only 21 or something. Right. Do you think it's possible for him to be hardwired, like change his hardwiring a little bit so that he almost takes that Draymond Green mentality of whether or not I score, it doesn't matter. I want to win games, and this is how I can help my team win games. So that, okay, I understand from my coach that I'm not a great finisher when I catch the ball as the roll man, but I have all these other skills, like maybe I can put pressure on defenses with my explosiveness and then make good passes.
Right. Yeah.
Is that possible at this point, or is he so you don't know him personally, I presume, but do you think he's so hardwired to be that alpha scorer mentality, despite maybe his lack of skill at this level, that it's impossible to change?
I've thought almost verbatim the same thing that you just asked right now, and my brief answer is I don't know. Having coached a lot of young people, I really hate the idea of saying that someone is who they're going to be at 21, and that's who they're going to be forever and ever. I know I'm certainly not the same person I was at 21. And so the idea that he can't grow and become more, especially he's got so much innate talent, there's so much there. Right. It's but the hard wiring, I think that for one, I think he was the biggest victim of Byron Scott the last couple of years, or last year. Obviously, he was hurt the year before, but I think that the style of play really accentuated those things that you just mentioned, of that hardwiring of having to be the man and having to every time you have the ball in your hands, you have to achieve personal glory, and that's the only way to do it. I think those habits were most reinforced in him. I think Russell's going to be all right. Clarkson, Nance, they're going to be fine. My question is, are there other examples in NBA history or recent NBA history of a guy who was the man being able to, sublimate his game a bit and become a more complete player? And if so, how long did that take? You bring up Draymond Green. Draymond Green was a role player in college too,
Right.
and he was an off-ball type of player that was a good defender and did the dirty work. Like I said, for a guy like me, I try to learn something new every time I watch a game. And that's something that I've tried my whole life. I fell in love with basketball at a very early age. This is one of those things that makes me go, I don't know. I don't know if, because there's so much talent there, but there's so much, like you said, there's a lot of hardwiring going on there. Can that change? I wish I knew. And to me, that's one of the most fascinating storylines about this season.
Yeah, I think with Randall, it's like, can you recalibrate him to focus on the little things first and then get back to that elite talent? Because in transition, you see all that elite talent come into play, right? Being able to rebound, push the floor, and then you actually see his playmaking vision. But then when you get into the half court, that playmaking vision disappears and it becomes almost like a Kobe Bryant playmaking vision, where it's like, I'll pass it off at the very last second and give my teammates like a very bad shot because I had nowhere to go, Whereas Nance, it almost seems like, especially from Summer League, like he can make the proper reads and knows how to follow directions and just make the solid pass, and it pinpoints guys right where they need to get the ball. Randall, I'm not sure if he has that yet, but obviously we haven't seen him play under Luke and have a backup plan to things that fall and whatnot. So I guess in what ways do you think Luke will help Randall get to that point, I guess?
Well, I think that this is going to be the first time that Randall's been in this style of play. And I think we put upon players the notion that they're a particular type of player. This guy's a ball stopper. This guy is this guy is that. I feel like the system that's in place is far more influential than people realize. I included this in a video I did on Luke to the Lakers, but a stat that I find interesting is, the Sports VU stats, the data has been available for 3 seasons. And the 2013-14 Golden State Warriors, which was the last season of Mark Jackson, they were last in the league in passes made per game. And not only were they last in the league in passes made per game, they were actually made the fewest passes of any team in the 3 years that data has been tabulated. So, or at least made public. And that's with the same core of Steph and Clay and Iguodala and Bogut, Barnes. All those guys were there the last season that Mark Jackson was there. And then overnight, it became this symphony of ball movement and player movement with the exact same group of guys. So my glass half full take on that is, yes, Nance is more naturally inclined to play that way. But I'm not going to write Randall off before I see him playing in this style of play and being actually coached on the details. And, Tommy, you asked about what can kind of change that wiring, and is it possible? I think minutes are, quite the motivator. And Nance is going to be very good for him in that respect, because I think that, if one was the 14th pick in the draft and the other was the 15th pick in the draft, I think there'd be more conversation about Nance being the rightful starter right now. Then, Randall is the 7th and Nance is the 27th. And so I think minutes are a big motivator, and then success. It's not lost on Randall how much he struggled as an offensive player last year, and a young player is going to be a lot more willing to listen to a coach's input when he has credibility, which Luke is bringing from Golden State. And he's able to show him, hey, it's not just a matter of, hey, do this because I told you to, but this is going to help you, and these are the reasons why. And I don't think that component of communication was a part of the coaching style of the last couple of years. So I want to see Randall on the court before I write him off, you know?
For sure. Okay, this last point on this Randall Nance thing, because it's been a heavy topic in debate, but one way I've compared the two right now, just right now in a vacuum, is if you look at players from a different position, I almost compare Larry Nance to a Courtney Lee type player and Julius Randle to a Monte Ellis type player, who Monte Ellis for sure is the better player in terms of what skills he has, the one-on-one stuff that he has. He can probably take, Courtney Lee on one-on-one and beat him 10 times out of 10, right? But which guy do playoff teams prefer? Because one, he knows the fundamentals, knows the simple principles, and knows how to play, defense and also just shoot threes.
Right.
And understands that utility. Right now, I feel like Nance has that mentality, and it's going to take Julius Randle or even envisioning Monte Ellis going to the Golden State Warriors now to see his full potential come out. And then you can bring in the elite talent and skill. So.
No, I agree. I think to put it in a crude way, I think you have on-ball players and off-ball players, right? In a very general sense. And a guy like Monte Ellis is an on-ball player. Courtney Lee is an off-ball player. Larry Nance is an off-ball player. Julius Randle is an on-ball player. The thing about on-ball players is, are you good enough at creating your own shot and creating shots for others to justify giving you the ball? And at this point, Randle is not, which is why Nance is the more valuable asset at this point in time, because he's better at the off-ball stuff, the screening, the defense, all of that stuff. That said, there's so much natural ability within Randle that if he can be taught those things, he has traits that Nance just doesn't possess. And that's when you start getting into a Draymond Green type of player. You know what I mean? So, so that's what it comes down to is I too would prefer a Courtney Lee type of player over a Monte Ellis, because Monte Ellis isn't going to do those things off of the ball. But if you can get a Monte Ellis to play defense and do all the little things Courtney Lee does, yeah, of course, you're going to prefer.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's move on and just quickly talk about our rookie this year, Brandon Ingram, because in Summer League, I saw him. It just seems like he already has this mindset and mentality. I don't know if Krzyzewski does sort of the same things in Duke, but there was this one play in particular in the first game where Brandon Ingram drove into the lane, went baseline, and found D'Angelo for a three, and D'Angelo ended up taking it. But what you didn't see after that play was Brandon Ingram fill the lane and fill the gap on the baseline, waiting for the open three just in case D'Angelo was going to pass it. And so I guess, how do you see Brandon Ingram fitting in, and do you see him as like the perfect type of player? And I guess, were you like a Simmons or Ingram kind of guy?
So I had a slight preference for Simmons. However, the last question that you asked about Courtney Lee versus Monte Ellis, I think is applicable here. I will be very surprised if Brandon Ingram is not a very good player in the league. I could see Simmons as a bust, because if he's not good enough at doing those things on ball, then he doesn't have that those off ball capabilities of falling back on. The ceiling that I see for Ingram is Kawhi Leonard, where you have a really first team all defense type of defender who can switch 2 through 4 seamlessly and take the best player amongst those guys, who is also very good on the offensive end. He gets compared to Durant a lot because of his body type, and I don't really see that. Durant was a lot more fluid than Ingram was at the same age, and I think Ingram lacks some of that twitch and that fluidity that comes with those really, Durant's only averaged less than 25 points a game once in his career. You know what I mean? So It's kind of an unfair comparison to make in the first place. But Ingram is a guy that he reminds me of Karl Anthony Towns. I said this about him last year, in that I can't think of many things that he's bad at. Almost every box he's a 5 out of 10, and at the very least, with having a few 7 and 8 out of 10s. And to be able to say that about an 18, soon to be 19-year-old is really tremendous. I also think it's going to take some time, and I hope that Laker Nation has the patience for him that they did not always afford D'Angelo Russell last year, in understanding that he's 19 years old and is probably entering the league as a 3-and-D guy. But to your point about like that relocation on that Russell 3 that he made, that's a great observation. He does a ton of those little things, and he was really was really he helped spearhead a solid defensive effort from the team in summer league this year, and he's one of the better 18-year-olds I've ever seen in terms of rotating defensively, which is one of the cardinal sins that get young guys attached to the bench. I think he's not going to hurt you, which is a lot to say for a guy his age. So.
Yeah, and it also seems like he just has really good, at least it's not flashy, but really solid playmaking vision in the half court and making the right reads, So I really appreciate that out of him. So I guess, do you think that becoming a rookie in this league, could he have entered into a more perfect situation with Luke Walton and what he's planning to implement?
No,
I guess
it's a great. It goes both ways. I think that the Lakers are very fortunate to have him, and I think that they couldn't have asked for much more in terms of what he brings to the table. And then, on top of Luke and the system that we anticipate him bringing, he's going to be the thing that he's going to struggle with at first is shot creation on his own, and he's going to be surrounded by guys like Russell, Randall, Clarkson, even guys like Calderon and Lou Williams off of the bench who can create shots for themselves and then by extension for him. Whereas if he would have been drafted by Philly, you're looking at TJ McConnell as a shot creator and not a whole lot else. And he would have been put in a situation that was detrimental to him. So it's definitely a mutually beneficial relationship.
For sure. Tommy, any comments?
No, I think you guys pretty much summarized it. I do like the sort of like comparison to Karl Anthony Towns in the sense that he's good at so many. It's like right now you can't really say, oh, okay, well, he's like elite at this one thing, but he's so solid at so many things that although he's 19, I think he's going to make an impact. I completely agree that people's expectations are probably going to be too high for him. But I am like pretty confident he's going to be able to make a solid impact even as a 19-year-old rookie, just because he has such a good feel for the game.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go to the last player that I think every Laker fan probably is just thinking about, and that's Ivica Zubac. So I don't know if you even had this guy as part of your scouting report, or if you even knew anything about him.
Actually.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. So this is perfect segue. But how do you see this guy fitting in? Because obviously Mitch was throwing out the Marc Gasol stuff early on, but how do you see him, I guess, being that Andrew Bogut type analog that the Warriors had for Luke Walton?
No, I love that kid. I went to the summer games in Vegas, and he had the crowd eating out of his hand. It was similar to Nance last year, when everyone was chanting his name, and then again this year, but he's one of those guys that you just know that kid's a Laker, and I actually think the Marc Gasol comparisons are not all that far off. We tend to compare every, I remember when Javaris Crittenton was the next, you know what I mean? Like we tend to put those ceilings on guys, but in his case, I think it's not too far away. What I saw of him, he's got great hands, and that's something that, again, that's something you just can't teach. And he had a ton of just tip-ins and the way he would control the ball on an offensive rebound, or just, or he'd catch a slightly errant pass. I was really impressed with that. He's got a bit of a quick jump to him, which surprised me. That was the most surprising part of his game. And he blocked a lot of shots that I think, guards would drive in and they think they'd get that little teardrop over him, and then he'd swat it away. He did that to Buddy Hield at least once, and he did that in a couple of other games as well. As a rim protector, he was very impressive. He has some, as is true of a lot of 19-year-olds, he has some technical things to clean up. He gets turned sideways a lot on drives to the basket, and he draws fouls as a result of that. He will come down rather than staying vertical and draw fouls as a result of that. I was pleasantly surprised with how he ran the floor. I thought that might be a difficulty for him. My biggest concern with him, and it's just more indicative of the way that the league is going these days, is you saw this mostly in the Cavs game. He can only run a couple of pick and roll coverages defensively. He can help you ice, and he can help you soft hedge. Basically anything that keeps him in the paint, he can do. The problem with that, and it's similar to the reasons why a guy like Mozgov couldn't get off of the bench in Cleveland this year, is that if you have guards who can pull up from mid-range and knock that down consistently,
Right.
or even more so, bigs who can pick and pop, you almost can't play that kind of guy in those
Right.
sorts of situations, you know.
Yeah.
That said, he's going to be a guy that is able to fill a particular role. I was tremendously impressed with his post play, and
Yes.
that's something that, you know, I think that people considered Golden State to be a team that just, you know, ran around and chucked threes. I would actually argue they were the best post up team in the league last year. They just didn't have anybody that could take advantage of scoring off of it, but they have great action with their split cuts off of that. And then once the split cuts clear, it creates an isolation that is more similar to the days of the 80s and 90s when post-up play was really a lot more effective than it is now. They just didn't have guys that could really take advantage of that in an Ezeli, a Bogut. Those aren't guys that are going to take a guy one-on-one. A guy like Zubats is going to be able to do that in a couple of years. You know, I saw the foundation of a very good post-up game. So he's going to be a guy that's going to bring something very specific to the table, and there are going to be times where he's not going to be able to play. But I also think he's going to be, even as much as Ingram, someone who benefits from NBA caliber strength and conditioning, to be able to get his quickness and just get his body right. But yeah, I like him a lot. He brings a lot to the table, and he's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think like even in your Nance video, even Nance had trouble guarding off the pick and roll with guys like McRae and Felder who could just pull up from the mid-range. So even more so, Zubats, who's a little slower and more loafing, would have problems with speedy guards like that. And that's what I wanted to see, whether he could do that. And apparently right now he can't. But at least on offense, you know, the other thing I liked about him was he sets mountains of screens. You know, it's like bone-crushing screens that really erase people and allowed D'Angelo, really freed him up, really. So I thought that was great. I think the next part of his evolution offense, obviously, and I think maybe Luke will help facilitate this, is how good is his playmaking vision and his passing vision to really step into that Marc Gasol, like Andrew Bogut role. Because, you know, given how good he is in terms of touch and feel around the basket, I wouldn't be surprised if he's a pretty good passer as well, especially when guys are doing what they're supposed to do and moving into the right spaces they're supposed to hit.
Yeah, I totally agree. So when you post up in this system, the big is supposed to catch and survey, because there's a split cut where basically the strong side guards will screen for each other and then roll or pop or slip off of that. And so the big job is to catch that ball in the post and then watch for the split cut to develop. And if anyone's open, you hit them with it. If not, then you go to work. In the summer league, he'd get that post up, and, you know, I mean, he's a Laker. He's just coming over from overseas. He's excited. He'd catch and he'd go to work, right? So that split cut was never even given a chance to develop. So something like just little things like that, and that's something that he can have down within a month, you know, after training camp. So I totally agree that's the next step in his evolution, and that's going to be something that the more bigs that we have that are able to make to play make, as you said, and make those reads off of screens, the better we're going to be. And the only one that I'm confident in right now in being able to do that is Randall. So
interesting. Yeah, I mean, with Zubats, we saw that one play where he was at the high post and he threw it down low to Larry Nance. It was pretty high pass, but Nance got it. But that's the kind of action you typically see with like Bogut and other cutters. So, all right. So let's end this with, talking about the personnel overall and whether you think Mitch has done a good job assembling the right pieces for Luke and this system. Because in the previous years, we were like, well, we had the perfect pieces for D'Antoni, but all of a sudden we got this Byron Scott guy. He's using them incorrectly. But now, do you see we have more of the right pieces? And I guess if you had to highlight any holes that still exist in this Lakers roster, and what you think they could use more of in terms of whether that's another position or just a skill set, what do you think those would be?
Yeah, no, the worst thing I can say about the roster right now is that they're very young, and young players don't win. You know, I think that they've got a ton of great pieces for Luke to grow with, both him as a coach and just the organization as a whole. I'm very high on all of our young guys. I think they've done a tremendous job with that. But it's just going to take time for them to develop. I like Mozgov, maybe not for the contract quite that he got, but I like Mozgov as a player, and I'm really high on Luol Deng. I think he's gonna be a guy that ties things together in a number of ways, and is very professional. In terms of skill sets that I think are missing on the roster, I think we could use a playmaking wing. I think part of what made Golden State really hum offensively is not just a guy like Draymond who could facilitate, but Iguodala. He's a really very difficult skill set to replicate. And having guys like that allow guys like Russell and Clarkson to run around without the ball in their hands and let the system create advantages for them. As much as I like Deng, he's not really a playmaker that's going to do that. I can see Brandon Ingram being that guy eventually. I agree with you that he has talent as a passer, and I think that's something that we'll see. But again, as a 19-year-old, that's not an expectation that I have at this point. Tonight the news came out with Woj announced that OKC and Westbrook are close to that 3-year extension. For me, the guy that I have circled on my free agent pie in the sky calendar that all of us Laker fans have every year, it's 2 years from now, but I think the planets are aligning for Paul George. I think having a wing that can curl off of screens, I think he was 5th or 6th in the NBA in attempts off of screens and play make off of them and defend as well. He's a guy that checks all of those boxes.
Right.
And yeah, so he's someone that I'm hoping for, and he represents the skill sets that are missing in this young roster. But all in all, I'm very happy with where the Lakers are. I don't expect them to be more than a 32-ish win team this year. But I think I'm very bullish on the future.
Gotcha. I guess, Tommy, do you have anything to add?
No, I think you guys covered everything I was going to say.
I guess real quickly, do you see Luol Deng being an almost sort of like veteran version of Harrison Barnes this season in terms of just hitting threes on the baseline, playing defense? How do you see him fitting in quickly?
I think that's a good analogy. The one difference that I'd
like a good Harrison Barnes who can hit shots.
Well, he had a rough finals, but all in all, Harrison was a solid player. Yeah. He just disappeared at the wrong time. The thing about Barnes is he does 3 or 4 things every game that, what the heck were you thinking? And Luol Deng doesn't do that. He's going to be with young guys. We're going to have nights where, Russell scores 30 and we're going to have nights where he goes 4 for 17, and that's going to be true of the young guys across the board. Luol Deng is pretty much the same guy every time he hits the court, and I think there's a lot of value in that. I also think there's a lot of value in he makes very few mistakes. If you're looking for a guy to create a shot or to dazzle you with individual brilliance, he's not that guy. But in terms of being someone dependable that the young guys can flourish off of, I think he's very much of that mold. And I think a dependable Harrison Barnes, a grown-up Harrison Barnes, is a very good analogy for him.
Awesome. Okay, so let's close the show out by, you kind of hinted at it earlier about talking about the Russell Westbrook extension. And since you're here, I thought might as well keep you in the discussion. So let me ask you, Tommy, first, what your thoughts on Westbrook signing this 3-year extension, which is a player option after the second year. So that would be 2018-19. He's already signed on to this year, so it's essentially a 1-year extension. I guess, what do you guys think this does for, I guess, Westbrook, OKC, how the Lakers proceed? Because I feel like some people were maybe speculating that the reason why Brandon Ingram isn't signed yet is in a wait-and-see scenario. So with this kind of cleared up and shored up, I guess, what do you guys think?
I'll go first. I mean, I don't really see, and I don't know, maybe we could talk this through, but I've been struggling since I heard about this to figure out any rational reason why this would be a benefit for Westbrook. He's going to be a free agent next summer anyway. He's just committing himself for an extra year to a team that is not going to compete. I mean, they'll make the playoffs with him, and they have some decent young talent and a pretty decent coach, but they're not going to compete seriously in the next 2 years. I mean, unless, even if they sign another top superstar next summer, that still doesn't, he still, in my opinion, should have just taken play this final year out and see how things go in the last year. And so that was really confusing to me in terms of being bummed as a Laker fan. I think everybody is waiting for that star to come. Apparently it's not going to be Westbrook now if this happens, but I'm not I'm not that bummed about it. Pete was talking about Paul George earlier. That's sort of a guy that I've had on my radar too, as being the next potential, because because we're going with this like full rebuild. Let's keep the young guys. Clearly, they haven't shown signs that they're trying to sell the farm to get one or two star players. So if this is the route we're going to go, why not look further down the line to, 2 years from now or even 4 years from now when Anthony Davis is going to be a free agent, because those are the types of guys that at those times will fill a need and will mesh with exactly what we're trying to do, as opposed to Westbrook, who is a phenomenal player, super exciting to watch, but is obviously, it's not like you just plug him into Luke's system with a bunch of, even if he just signed here next summer, it's not like you could just plug him into Luke's system with a bunch of 20-year-old, 22-year-olds and just be like, okay, well, that works. You know what I mean? So right. I wasn't super bummed when I saw that. I just don't personally think it makes any sense.
What about you, Pete? What did you think of the Westbrook extension and how that translates to what the Lakers want to do, what the league does, etc.?
Sure. Well, I think the rationale from Westbrook's end of things is twofold on why he does this now. Is I think that adding that extra year pushes him to 10 plus years of service in the league, which pushes him into a different max tier. And then gotcha. With the massive spike in cap space this year, Eric Pincus has a good article on this, on how teams can restructure deals and players can get more money in the short term. And I think that Westbrook was one of the guys that fell under that threshold where he'd get more money and it would benefit him financially to restructure now. James Harden did a similar deal recently. It extended in that manner. And then I have the same feelings as Tommy does on this, in that, Westbrook is a sun that planets orbit around. You know what I mean? He's a superstar, and that's I'm not going to downplay. That's the hardest thing to come across in the NBA. And if you have a chance, you got to do what you got to do. By the same token, he is the system. He's a guy similar to LeBron, in that when, David Blatt, believe it or not, is a very good X's and O's coach, but you didn't see that when he was coaching a guy like LeBron James, because that guy, and rightfully so, is going to be the sun that all of your planets orbit around. You know what I mean? Right. And how that would jive with Luke's system, I certainly have questions about that as well. I don't know. I'm excited. I remember the Nick Van Exel and Eddie Jones teams very, very well, and how much fun those teams were. And this group reminds me a lot of that. They weren't around for when the Lakers started winning titles again, but they sure were a big part of the reason that we were able to get that superstar in Shaq in '96. So I would like to add to the current core that we have, and that if something opportunistic pops up, you got to do what you got to do. But I'm really not jumping all over myself to move Russell or Ingram or anyone else for Westbrook. Especially him. Let's wait and let's. And that's the thing. People were concerned about Durant not giving a meeting or Whiteside and whatnot. No top free agents are going to go to a 17-win team. It's never happened before in the NBA. And I'm perfectly content with watching this team win 32 games this year and then 42 games the next year, or whatever, and then adding pieces along the way.
Yeah, almost like the Durant signing, him not taking a meeting with the Lakers allowed the Lakers to move on, and now Westbrook re-signing allows the Lakers to move on as well. And the implications of that, obviously, is hopefully we get to see Brandon Ingram sign as early as, tomorrow or next week, which would be great. And I'm sure he was waiting on pins and needles. But, at the same time, Westbrook is still not out of the picture if there are some Lakers fans that are diehard for him, which I'm not as well. But this kind of just gives the Lakers more time as well to round out their team, develop their guys, and continue to build their on-court resume. So maybe in 2-3 years, when Westbrook takes that player option, he's like, oh, the Lakers are actually good. Now I'll come. But at that time, Paul George will be available as well. And he'll be like, oh, shoot, the Lakers actually have established this culture and this system and this core of players that I would want to join and help facilitate. So I think on the Lakers end, that's how this deal the implications of this deal trickle down. Yeah. So, and then on OKC's end, I think it just buys OKC a little bit more time to think about what they want to do with Westbrook. And then at the same time, some people pointed this out on Twitter, but it also helps increase Westbrook's trade value a little bit in case OKC sees that this team is not as good as they thought it was, and mid-season they're like, okay, well, maybe we should trade Westbrook now, which is what Presti's prone to do. Like, he does it usually a year and a half before or a year before. At that point, because a team knows they're going to be trading for Westbrook and it's going to be more than just a half a year or a year, and that he'll have that 2017, 2018 year on with them, they may be more applicable to trade some better pieces to OKC. Yeah. So I think on both ends, this helped OKC, and this also helped Westbrook in terms of, still weighing his options, hedging his options a little bit, but also getting more money at the same time. And seeing if he can't be the MVP that he thinks he is, and going, screw you, Durant, and let me take this season by storm, kind of. So he gets to play both sides, I guess. All right. With that said, Pete, thank you so much for, joining us on this podcast. It was honestly really great talking with you, just gaining some more insight and knowledge that you have on just basic basketball principles and even the nuances as well. I bet people are wondering why you don't have a podcast and why we do. And, I would ask the same thing, but guess what? We've got the podcast. So boom. And we actually asked you. So there you go. I wouldn't be surprised if we ended up seeing you down the line with a podcast of your own and we guessed on each other. Maybe more so you guessing on ours. Tommy, any last words for Pete?
No, Pete, thank you so much again. I hope everybody, you should definitely plug your YouTube channel and your Twitter and all that stuff, because everybody should definitely follow you and subscribe to all of that stuff.
Yeah, Pete, once again.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. I had a blast. Thank you so much for allowing me to come on. I'd love to come on again anytime you'll have me. Yeah. So you can follow me on Twitter at Laker Film Room, and you can find me on YouTube under the same name.
Awesome. Thank you once again. That's Pete Zayas?
Sure.
Say it again one more time.
Zayas, yeah.
Zayas. Pete Zayas at Laker Film Room. Thank you again, Pete, and we will catch you later. And hopefully once the Lakers actually start playing actual meaningful basketball once again.
All right, Jonathan, Tommy, thanks so much, guys.
Thank you. Catch you later, man.
People compare me with Marc Gasol, and I really like that comparison. And I'm looking his clips on YouTube and everything, and trying to steal some moves from him.
All right, once again, that was our show with Pete Zayas at Laker Film Room, and man, that was a blast, huh? We've been doing this podcast all wrong the entire season, pretty much. We should have just had Pete as an ongoing guest. We're just thankful and glad that he was able to come on the show and just transfer his knowledge and insight to us for sure. And we'll definitely plan on having him back towards the beginning of the season, maybe even mid-season, to see how all of our speculations and hypotheticals in this podcast pan out. So once again, thank you guys for listening. Please follow us on Twitter at Lakers Legacy Pod. Also, please rate and review us on iTunes, because like I said, the more you rate and review us, that's how many karaoke nights the young core will go out on the town and do this next season to build that chemistry and also build some cool singing vibes and harmonies. Because if you can do that with a mic, you can surely do it with a basketball, am I right? All right, with that said, I'll catch you guys later. Peace. Pushing and pulling and wishing that Messiah would be coming soon with his deliverance.